Welcome back to Loyalty Leaders Podcast. I'm David Feldman, Chair of Loyalty Summit, and we're back with another very well-known guest, Henry Harteveldt, who is the founder of Atmosphere Research Group. Henry, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, David.
And for those few listeners perhaps who aren't familiar with your work, could you give us the quick intro into what you do with Atmosphere and sort of, what your angle, as an industry analyst is, what your sort of your day job, so to speak?
Yeah. So, sure. Thanks. Atmosphere Research is a market research firm that studies the travel industry. We focus now primarily on airlines, but we do look at lodging, including hotels and vacation rentals. But airlines are probably 90% or more of what we look at right now. And we look at it from the standpoint of consumer behavior. We conduct consumer research in a dozen countries. We do industry research, a lot around distribution and what's now known as retailing, where airlines are trying to sell us offers, get us to place orders as we proceed down the path towards a more unbundled model within the industry. And we look at technology, the technologies that enable airlines to sell, to market, to operate, and so on. We do this independently. We're a boutique firm. We're small, and we are very objective, and we're very passionate about that. Before starting Atmosphere in 2011, I worked at Forrester Research, the tech research firm, for 11 years, and there I had a list of sticky notes of the CEOs and other top executives I pissed off and what they said about me. And there were a lot of sticky notes on the wall. My job isn't to coddle people. My job is to take a look at data, interpret it, tell the story respectfully. But sometimes that means you have to say, you got an ugly baby.
So it's fair to say, Henry, that you understand, you look at through the lens of the business and the commercial side of a lot of things that we see in the airline industry. And there's been a lot of change, just since 2011 with your time at Atmosphere. But I mean, obviously before that as well, if you think about the time leading up to that, all the major airlines in the US, we had mergers and bankruptcies and things like that. So it's been a long period of upheaval. And if we go back longer than that, of course, back when you had more hair, my hair was darker. Obviously, at the turn of the century, we had some significant shocks to the airline industry. It's an industry that is constantly in motion. Change is not new. I mean, I think that's a fair starting point that we can all agree on.
It is. Look, the industry has been one under evolution since 1978 when it was deregulated. And Southwest Airlines, along with airlines like PSA and a handful of others, were disrupting within the confines of a deregulated airline industry by being exclusively intrastate airlines and therefore exempt from government regulation by the now defunct Civil Aeronautics Board. You want to talk about change. As we tape this interview, there are two TWA posters behind me. Now, they're beautiful posters. They're vintage 1960s posters by David Klein, the artist. I worked for TWA earlier in my career in the 1980s. TWA is not around. Braniff, the airline that was my favorite as a kid, going between New York and Dallas to see my grandparents and family down in Texas, that was the first big airline to go bust. We've seen bankruptcies happen across this industry. Notably, Southwest never has declared bankruptcy, but this industry has gone through constant change, whether it's commercial change, technology change. Think back, we're barely 30 years into the period of digital commerce with airlines. Alaska was the first airline to launch a transactional website in 1994. We went through the shock of 9/11. We went through SARS. We went through a Great Recession. We went through COVID, the pandemic. And along the way, there were numerous mergers and numerous bankruptcies, and all along changes in how airlines do business. Mm-hmm. Now, look, we're talking about Southwest. And again, in great part because my mom was from Dallas, And we would go down there at least once a year to visit my family there. I had this knowledge about Southwest, but as an analyst, as someone who's worked for different airlines and competed against Southwest, in some cases I beat them, in other cases they beat us. But as an analyst with more than 24 years of experience, I've watched Southwest transform. But here's the thing: Southwest has done little changes around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we've seen airlines like Delta and United and Alaska make much more substantial changes. Even JetBlue has made more substantial changes. So what have we seen Southwest do? Well, they used to favor secondary airports in major cities like Hobby in Houston and Dallas Love Field, Midway in Chicago. Guess what? Now they're at LaGuardia in New York. They're at Boston Logan. They're at LAX. They're back at SFO, San Francisco International, and other primary airports. They are flying medium haul routes now and coast-to-coast routes. They are essentially a hub and spoke airline. Roughly 40% of Southwest passengers connect. They are flying to Mexico and Central America and the Caribbean. They've gone through two mergers, Morris Air and AirTran. But in the last year, we've seen Southwest make some major, not even last 6 months, make some major announcements. They're going to assign seating. And I think that's a smart move. The open seating that some people like is the biggest deterrent to people flying Southwest, especially higher yielding, moderate and frequent travelers and frequent business travelers. They're going to add an extra legroom section 30 years or so after United introduced Economy Plus. Again, something that Southwest has heard its competitors speak about, read their financial reports, seen the profit associated with it, and they're finally making this change. They only introduced red-eye flying in February of this year. They used to blame their reservation system, their previous reservation system, until I pointed out it was based on the Braniff Cowboy res system, and Braniff operated overnight flights, so that excuse held no water. It turned out it was technology limitation in their system operations center. Okay, fine. Then fix it. Fix it. And of course, the big bombshell that sent a shockwave across the industry was the announcement they're going to start checking for checked bags after more than 16 years of saying bags fly free, and building up equity that 97% of their customers are aware of the policy. It's one of the 3 top reasons, according to Southwest, that why people choose the airline, and the airline's own admission that charging for bags will cost it more money than it will generate. Because as you said in the introduction, David, they are looking more and more like just another airline, only they're not. Because part of the problem is they have fewer airline partners. They don't have as robust a loyalty program as their key competitors do, especially the big 3, American, Delta, and United. They have a limited international network. It's just to Mexico and Central America. And they don't serve a lot of small to mid-sized cities because of the fleet limitation of the 737. They don't have regional equipment or A220s or airplanes like that are better suited to serving smaller destinations.
And a couple of quick questions. If I could jump in, Henry, because you made a point a few minutes ago just about, when we look at recent changes, even beyond sort of the bombshell of the last week, they've certainly made in the last short period of time, 12, 18 months, maybe slightly longer. When you look back, you can certainly see that they've made a definitive effort to, hey, we need to monetize more, whether it is additional upsell and upgrade options, not just for fares, but for early boarding, for example. It used to be that early boarding, you just did it, or you bought the business select fare, and then there was sort of one angle of upcharge, and now there's more angles of upcharge. You could buy early boarding, but now you can also if early boarding slots aren't sold, even right up to departure, you can monetize that more. So, I don't think anybody necessarily holds that against them. I mean, as you say, there are some people that were very fond of the open seating policy and they treated it like a game and all the rest of it. But you know what? Guess what? Those customers were already flying Southwest.
Right.
So as you say, what you had is two groups of people who love the open seating policy, who, guess what, were by and large existing Southwest customers, and people who loathed it. And the people who loathed it were I'm never ever flying Southwest customers.
Right.
And then you had people in the middle who kind of like, well, whatever, it's different, I don't care. And I think you're right in the sense that the people that loathe it are never going to give Southwest $1. The people who love it, look, they love it, they play the game, but if Southwest does allocated seating, they'll still fly Southwest if they're choosing the airline. So I think you're right that people are going to, look at that and say, you know what, things change, but that's probably a smart decision by Southwest. But
right, but let's tease that out a little bit. Okay, first, we just got research back from our first quarter 2025 U.S. Survey of 5,003 U.S.-based airline passengers. Only 13% say that they are loyal to an airline or airline alliance. That's down from 14% last year. It's been down every year, sometimes by a point, sometimes by 2 or more points. Let me just give you contrast. When I became an analyst at Forrester, January 2000, and we did our first study, which was a survey that was mailed out to people in those days before you had online surveys. We got it back. Roughly 44% of the airline passengers we surveyed in the US said they were loyal. So airlines have destroyed roughly 2/3 of the base of people who were loyal. Now, the downside is there are fewer people who feel a sense of loyalty or strong preference for an airline. The upside is roughly 87% of customers make their airline purchase decision trip by trip. Now, we know a lot of people have a consideration set of airlines. So to the point you made, maybe Southwest is an airline you'll consider flying. Maybe it is not. Your consideration set obviously depends on where you live and heavily, if you travel for work, who your employer's preferred airline or airlines may be. If Southwest isn't a big player where you live, well, by default, you're not going to consider them. If you live in Houston, if you live in Chicago, if you live in Atlanta, if you live here in the Bay Area, and many other cities, though, Southwest is certainly a viable airline to consider. Now, to your point about monetization, you're right. People don't mind paying for priority boarding, and they don't mind airlines selling that. It's an understood aspect of how airlines do business. And to Southwest's credit, the price for early boarding, A-zone boarding, or A1 through 15, varies based on load factor and how many of those boarding slots they've sold and the route of the duration of the flight. So that can be very reasonably priced. I know reasonable is a subjective term, but looking at it from the standpoint of a typical traveler, it's a reasonable price. They're not charging you $300, $500, $800 for early boarding. Now, we also know that Southwest Airlines is the airline where people game the system by claiming they need early boarding assistance. We have all been at the gates, whether we're flying them or not, and you see all these people lining up, 10, 20, sometimes 30 or more people lined up to get on with some kind of need or whatever, real or imagined, and it's mostly imagined, of people who abuse the system because they want to get on and put their bag in the bin and get their first choice of seats. Assigned seating is going to reduce that. They're going to have 9 boarding groups. I got this from a Southwest SVP the other day in a meeting, which was on the record. And they expect that this will make boarding orderly. But going to assigned seating isn't a shockwave. It's a change, and it's a lowercase c change. Offering extra legroom seats isn't a shockwave. It's a change. I'll argue that's more of an uppercase C change, because since 1971, Southwest has been the most egalitarian airline out there, more so even than JetBlue, which embraced extra legroom seating years ago. And they announced, it got lost in the noise, but they did announce they're going to finally offer basic economy. That's a great change, especially right now as the economy itself is becoming less stable, more uncertain. People are probably going to be much more price sensitive than they may have been as they shop for their summer vacation plans. So that will make Southwest, I think, more competitive if they use basic economy well. That's great.
But, no, I mean, that's the key, though. It's about using it well, right? Because we've seen some other airlines have taken different approaches with basic economy, and some better, some not so good.
Right. Look, United Airlines, I think, is setting a standard of excellence in how they use it, because they are generating a lot of business and yet not displacing higher fare paying passengers. And they said, I think it's 12%, if I'm remembering the number correctly. I may not be, of passengers in, I guess it was first quarter 2025 or maybe it was for all of year end. No, it wouldn't be first quarter 25, of course. It would be, I think, fourth quarter 2024 or all of 2024 are basic economy passengers. And United has a way to upsell them and get them engaged in Mileage Plus, get them into the credit card, all of that. And that's fine. That's great. That's what you want Mileage Plus to be, right? It's like GM, the GM of old, where they had, the starter car and the intermediate brand lines, and then Cadillac at the top and so on. Stairway to heaven. Great. Any business that's a smart business will figure out ways to do this. So I don't hold that against Southwest. But when you drop a nuclear bomb on your own brand that destroys one of the strongest components of its brand equity and its primary point of differentiation, that 97% of your travelers, by your own research, know of, that's unheard of awareness. There are celebrities out there who don't have as high a level of awareness. I bet there are more people who know about Southwest free check bags than know about Taylor Swift, and everybody knows about Taylor Swift. But when you have that kind of equity and credibility, and because of an activist investor who knows less about the airline business than the pen I am holding, forces you to make a boneheaded, stupid, unnecessary, backwards change in terms of what it will do to your business. And the board of directors, which has a bunch of the investor appointed members, and the board chair capitulate, then, and force the airline to do this, I think it's a decision that they will come to regret. And by the way, I won't be surprised if after a period of time, if the business declines and they can prove it's related to check bags as opposed to other factors like the economy. But if they lose enough business, then I sure as hell hope that the leadership of Southwest leads and shows the board the information and says, we need to go back to 2 free checked bags. And if Southwest has said, you know what, we're paring it back to 1 free checked bag, I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. They'd say, you know what, that's reasonable. I don't check more than 1 bag usually. And if you want a second free checked bag, get the credit card, get elite status, whatever, buy business select. Okay, fine. If they had done that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be talking about something else. But instead, Southwest imploded. I mean, we've seen articles in newspapers, including the Wall Street Journal. We've seen blog posts and others saying the day Southwest Airlines died.
So just to clarify, we're clear for our listeners, Henry. So you're not a fan of the change of dropping no free bags. I just want to make sure we're not missing words here.
No, I know it's hard to tell, but no, I'm not.
But jokes aside,
And the reason is that for 16 plus years, Southwest has clung to free checked bags as a point of differentiation, and they claim it has been effective. And they shared with us last September that on Investor Day, I was listening to it, I wasn't there, that it was such a successful program and that they would lose more money if they charged for check bags than they would make. And that's credible. I believe them. So and it's telling. No other airline wanted to give up the revenue they're earning from check bags to match Southwest. JetBlue held out for a while, but then said they weren't getting enough of a revenue premium to justify it. So they pulled off the Band-Aid, and here we are. Southwest had some nonsensical statement about not getting value through third-party channels. Southwest only went into Expedia and other OTAs in the middle of February, and they may be on the Google Flights and some other price comparison engines, metasearch sites as they're also known. All those do is take you to the airline's website or mobile app to book. I mean, Southwest has one of the highest direct booking rates of any airline. So then it's up to them to bring the message home about 2 free checked bags regardless of fare. So in other words, Southwest is admitting they're lousy marketers. I don't think they are, but that's what it makes them sound like. And so they're using that as a false justification. It doesn't hold water.
So a couple of quick questions for you. So, I mean, let's just say, tease out the hypothetical here that, things don't suddenly turn around and, it's all unicorns and rainbows for Southwest moving forward. And, and assuming that they're able to attribute a large portion of future decline or future, failure to lift performance to the change in the check bag policy. Yes, you could see management come back and say, hey, you know what? We made it, mea culpa. We're going to reinstate the free bags, all the rest. But do you think the brand damage is done at this point? It's like kind of like a infidelity in a relationship.
Yeah, no, David, that's a really good question. I think a lot depends on what other steps does Southwest, if any, take, if any, to ameliorate the damage from this announcement in the wake, starting May 28th, when the check bag fees go into effect. Importantly, how long does Southwest stay with a check bag fee? And then what do they change to? Is it back to 2 free check bags for everybody? Is it 1 free check bag and so on? If they make a change, if the damage is so severe that within, let's say, 6 months, the airline and the board and the activist investor understand that they have to reverse course, then I think they can save things. Because it's like a lot of things that are short term. You can say it's an aberration. You can, try to explain it away, but it's still soon enough that people will say, well, okay. Now, they may have eroded trust because a lot of people will say, well, it's back, but is it back forever? Is it just back until they are doing better financially? And then are they going to take it away again and so on? So, they're going to have to work to rebuild trust, just as, let's say, a spouse who cheats on his or her partner is going to have to work like crazy to earn that person's trust back in the wake of an affair. And if it goes on for much longer than 6 months, if it goes on for a year or longer, the brand damage may be so extensive. I'm not sure how they will recover, short of literally buying back the business.
I mean, I think the challenge, I mean, you went through a pretty extensive laundry list of, I know I said previously about, they're turning into just another airline. But, the problem with just another airline is that's fine, but just another airline, you're thinking of Alaska and JetBlue maybe as the closest competitors. And then the big 3, Delta, United, American, all of whom have, certainly the big boys, all of whom have global alliances, lounges, much more robust set of elite benefits for their frequent flyers, the ability to redeem on a much broader and larger and more aspirational reward catalog, not just essentially a rebate on your flight purchase, but you're dreaming of that first class trip to Paris. Guess what? It might cost you 10 million, Sky Miles with Delta, but the reality is it's technically achievable. It's aspirational. Now, we know most people redeem domestically in coach, but the reality is there's a motivation there to join the program. You think you can get something outsized value in the future. And Southwest didn't have that, but it worked for Southwest under their old model. And I just feel like what Gary and I spoke about just earlier was, it's all well and good to be just another airline, but if that's the strategy, what seemed to be missing was the part B of the conversation where you would expect them to say, and this is our product investment roadmap over the next 5 years, where we're going to expand our product attributes, whether it's lounges, whether it's international partnerships, whatever it might be. I mean, there's a whole suite. It doesn't always have to be that top aspirational stuff. There was no, unless I missed it, there was no aspirational roadmap built into the announcement.
No, none. Now, first, I just want to clarify, Southwest can take you sort of to Paris, but it's Paris, Texas. You'll have to fly to Dallas and drive. But you're right. I mean, and again, this decision was made 2 weeks ago or so at a board meeting, and the announcement was shared with the airline's internal leaders roughly 10 or so days ago. And by the way, let's also keep in mind that one of the things Southwest announced at its investor day, again under pressure from Elliott, was its plan to reduce the turn time, aircraft turn time at airports. And it has begun the process of doing so at 14 airports, including most recently adding Houston Hobby and Chicago Midway to the mix. Everything they have done around reducing turn time was based on the incumbent model of free checked bags. So now they're having to go back and do a lot of modeling and recalculation and testing and so on to figure out what do they do in this new world, and will they still be able to achieve their new shorter turn times that they need to be a more efficient airline.
And for clarity, for those that aren't industry insiders, what we mean by that is with free checked bags, because people aren't paying for checked bags, they check them at the check-in desk rather than take them to the gate and then spend time putting them in the overhead and taking them off the overhead and all the rest. Whereas what we found in the 2000s when the other airlines introduced checked bag fees is all of a sudden everybody was taking the kitchen sink through security to the gate, and then it has to be checked, and then it has to be stowed, and then there's no room in the overheads, and it slows down the turn times.
Right. And we still see this to this day. I mean, my American Airlines flight from Dallas-Fort Worth to San Francisco today, 100% full. And, they made the usual announcements asking, I think it was for 20 people to please check their bags. And we hear it regardless of U.S. airline, and even regardless of how full the plane is, because it's just part of the script. But anyway, so Southwest is going to have to go back in and refigure out all of this stuff. Now, Southwest may be, to its credit, Southwest may be trying to bring on more international airline partners. They do have Iceland Air and a almost proof of concept type of interline relationship, I believe out of Baltimore. I know they would like to work with more airlines. The challenge is, will other foreign flag airlines want to work with Southwest, because Southwest does not have a premium cabin. So if you are a foreign flag airline reliant on first or business class and premium economy passengers, and you look at Southwest, certainly the airline has a reputation for value, and to the airline's credit, they've been working to improve their on-time reliability, and the Cirium monthly on-time performance reports show that they're doing a good job. So that's a feather in the airline's cap, but they don't have a premium cabin. They don't yet have an extra legroom section that won't be available until sometime in 2026. And they haven't even defined thoroughly what the extra legroom experience will be. Will alcohol be included or not? Priority boarding or not? A checked bag or not? And so on. So if you are a foreign flag airline with a a business class type cabin, you're going to look at Southwest and say, no offense, but I don't really want to interline with you because a critical mass of my highest value customers aren't going to get the kind of experience we want them to have from start to finish. And remember, JetBlue will start to offer its version of a domestic first class product in addition to the Mint they already have on many of its aircraft starting in 2026. So, it's, excuse me, David, it's a very crowded space. And, Southwest is a well-known airline, and, a lot of other airline executives know it, respect it, but they're not an airline necessarily they want to do business with. At least not for all of their customers. Imagine if they said, okay, we'll only do an interline with you for our economy passengers because you can't handle our premium cabin. I really think Southwest, when they did Investor Day, should have announced they were going to install a business class type of product. They had the data from AirTran. AirTran had a business class product. It was a very successful product for AirTran, and they killed it, along with getting rid of AirTran's 717s and turning around and leasing them to, the rival across the runway, Delta Airlines. Dumb. So, Southwest is evolving, but not always in the right way, not always as boldly as they need to. And I'm not sure how easy it will be for Southwest to get international airline partners. Now, here's the irony. There may be some alliance members who would go to Southwest and say, you know what, we are having trouble with some of our US partners getting inventory because they're holding it out for their own connections. So could we do a deal with you? When Virgin America was operating, Singapore and several other Pacific-based airlines, Asia-based airlines, serving San Francisco and LAX, did codeshare deals with Virgin on some of its routes. I remember Seattle, San Diego, and Las Vegas being three, and there may have been others. And the reason they did that, even though they were in various alliances and had a US airline partner, is that they couldn't work out the commercial terms, whether it was inventory, pricing, or both, to the volumes and levels they needed. And so Southwest could turn around and say, hey, we're here and we serve wild turkey. Come with us, and we have extra legroom seats. So, there is something there, but I'm not sure if it's compelling enough. And certainly from the standpoint of the US-based traveler, as you said, David, yes, most people redeem their miles for a domestic trip, but we all have aspirations. And whether that aspiration is a premium cabin trip or not, it may include going to see, an international destination. Maybe it's where your family came from. Maybe it's Paris because Paris is place everyone should visit. Maybe it's the pyramids and antiquities in Egypt. Maybe it's Oktoberfest. Maybe it's Mardi Gras in Sydney. It doesn't matter what it is or where it is or why you want to go there, but you may want to go there. And, Southwest doesn't offer an easy option for its Rapid Reward members to do that, nor their Chase Rapid Reward credit card holders. So, if I were Southwest, I would have pushed back on the board and said, look, introducing this for summer travel is terrible. Operationally, you're going to inconvenience and piss off a lot of people and piss off a lot of our own employees with a capital E. You're also not giving us enough time to make the changes, message this to people, get people ready for it internally and among the traveling public. And maybe they could have used this to also add one more long-haul partner and maybe announce the first sweetening of Rapid Rewards to ease the pain. Yet here we are.
So one of the takes that I've seen it from a few places coming out has been, well, okay, bags are being removed, but then on the flip side, but you can avoid the check bag fee by being an elite member or by having the credit card. And, you know, that's all well and good, you know, in isolation, if you're looking at it literally in isolation. But my immediate reaction to that is, that's great, but Southwest doesn't operate in isolation. Southwest operates in a competitive environment, and every single one of their competitors, if you're an elite member or you have their co-brand credit card, you don't pay the check bag fee. So there's no competitive differentiation even in the upside benefit.
Right.
But
In the investor
just go back to your earlier comment, they're giving up their one advantage they do have.
Right. In the Investor Day deck that they presented at the JP Morgan conference Tuesday, where they made this announcement, you know, they showed what they expected to gain from some credit card membership and people flying the airline more frequently. They're smoking something. You know, I know that pot is legal in Dallas. There was a cannabis store across the street from the hotel where I stayed. I don't smoke pot, by the way, but you know, maybe they were smoking some out on Love Field Drive when they were doing their financial estimates. Because again, as we've talked about, Southwest isn't that compelling. So if you're not flying Southwest regularly now, you're certainly not going to start doing so just because they're dropping free check bags, because you have a desire to become an elite member or carry the credit card to get around it. You're going to stay with your incumbent airline or airlines, and Southwest can't change enough of its own consumers' behavior to get them to fly more often.
Well, I think that's the point, though, right, Henry? Because the reality is, if you're talking about existing Southwest customer, is who Southwest, we've talked about this. They have a unique model. They have a very affinity loyal customer base and have had for many years. Those who love Southwest. You know, they go to southwest.com. They don't even price check, even though Southwest has often for many years been more expensive than competitors. That's been part of their marketing and commercial magic. So the reality is, if you're talking about somebody who currently is a Southwest customer, but they don't have elite status and therefore would be hit by this new check bag fee, if they're not already a card holder or having elite status, being punitive isn't suddenly going to make them, like you say, take incremental trips that they weren't taking beforehand. So therefore, it says the only way there could be an elite member in that case would be to consolidate their existing non-Southwest spend onto Southwest. But it's more likely than not to work the other way, like you just alluded to, where they're actually going to say, well, screw this. If you're becoming just another airline, and I'm already splitting between Airline X and Southwest, Airline X has lounges, and Airline X, if I'm an elite member, already gives me free bags, or a credit card holder gives me free bags. So there's no difference between the two there. I'm going to look on price, schedule, and product.
Right.
And maybe there's some aspects of product that Southwest is still good. I mean, let's put it this way. If you get on a Southwest aircraft, the crew are going to be smiling. And that is already miles ahead of the big three legacy carriers.
No, I got to tell you, my experiences in Southwest, I've had some very nice crew, and I've also had some really unpleasant crew. And you know, because it's a big airline, and the days of them being small and mostly based in Texas and having a kind of sense of, you know, almost counterculture spirit and the humor and everything, those are long gone. And they were gone, by the way, before Herb Kelleher, the co-founder and longtime CEO of the airline, died. Now, you know, Southwest people certainly are courteous and they're professional and they do their best to be helpful. But, you know, it's not like it was, you know, 15, 20, 25 or more years ago on board. But, you know, if you live near Love Field, if you live near Midway, if you live near Oakland International, Southwest, you know, at these airports and some others, is the largest airline. They're certainly the most convenient. You know, there's no reason for you to change the airline you fly if you like Southwest just because of the check bags. But all of a sudden, without that protection of free check bags, people will look at price and schedule more. And other factors. And if you are splitting your flying between Southwest and one or more other airlines, and Southwest is looking and acting more like another airline, but the compelling benefit isn't that great. I mean, what are you getting from Southwest? Once everything goes into effect, you'll eventually get, if you're an elite tier member or credit card holder, free or discounted access to an assigned seat, free or discounted access to extra legroom seating, maybe priority boarding, and one or two free checked bags. It's not that compelling anymore. It's just not. And so, we say Southwest is just another airline, except they're less than just another airline because of the very tangible gaps they have: lack of long-haul international network, lack of premium cabin, i.e. business class, lack of airport lounges. And even though the economy looks wobbly now, we all know economic cycles are just that, cycles. So maybe things, are getting soft now. They will, get better, hopefully soon. Then maybe we will be back on an economic upswing and to a period of economic strength. Southwest is not poised to win, not as they are now. And so, the airline, which already has a load factor gap versus key competitors and has, been struggling to make as much money as it once did, may now find itself further behind. And there's been a lot of speculation, David. Could this lead to a point where Southwest's value decreases so much it becomes a takeover target? Regardless of who is in the White House,
sure.
I think it would be very difficult for an airline, at least one of the three largest, to try to acquire Southwest.
Well, because you know the numbers probably more than anybody in the industry, but are they not the largest domestic carrier?
They are the largest domestic carrier by passengers carried. But, let's just say that Southwest finances don't get, improved much over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Let's just say, in fact, they get worse. They don't go bankrupt. I'm not talking that draconian. And let's hold steady that we don't have an awful recession as we did in 2008 or a pandemic. But let's just say that Southwest fortunes don't turn around. At some point, investors are going to say, you know what, the Southwest stock isn't for me. If I want to be in airlines, I'm going with somebody else. And the price sinks, and another airline, who could it be? Well, it would have to have an airline that could get the financing. That could be Alaska. Maybe it could be JetBlue. Who knows? Turns around and makes a bid for Southwest, to acquire them. It's not outside the realm of logic, though it is far-fetched. And I am absolutely not saying, emphatically not saying, that they are a merger candidate. Not today, possibly not ever. But it is something that could come to pass. Now, look, Southwest could bring in a supportive outside investor. As Qatar Airways has invested in some airlines, maybe another airline would want to take a stake in Southwest, and to counter Elliott, in fact, and who knows what would happen. But if Southwest does end up merging, we are all going to go back to Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and say, or was it the 12th? Anyway, no, it was the 11th. Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and say that is the day when Southwest sealed its fate, and it was the beginning of the end.
When we talk about reaction, I take your point, and I think that I take that you're very deliberately choosing your words there as well, Henry. To underscore the point. I mean, whenever there's change in the industry, whether it's American or United or Delta changing their loyalty program or whatever else, there's always a backlash. There's some of it can be attributed to just people are resistant to change, even when the change is positive or net neutral. There's always going to be a reaction. So it's always important to take, certainly, I think, social and again, you're the expert on this aspect, that it's important to take social media reaction in particular with a bit of a grain of salt. People always will say, I'm never going to fly this airline ever again, because I don't know, because my boarding pass didn't scan right away or what have you. But just two points I want to make quickly. And actually, I've just pulled up on my other screen here. I've literally just pulled up 4 or 5 quotes, just like kind of the top ones, the first ones that came up on Twitter when I literally just looked Southwest right now. Like, it's still such an active thing. I'll just read a couple of those off in a moment. But my reaction right now is, it seems to me that the backlash, the social media backlash right now, I don't think I've seen this in certainly my time in the industry. And usually when a loyalty program, for example, makes changes, or an airline makes changes, there's a backlash. But 90% of those people are sort of like your miles and points aficionados, not your, what I would call your average Joe. And I'm actually not seeing that this time. My interpretation is, there's not too many miles and points aficionados complaining right now. It seems to me a lot of the average Joes are. The first 3 or 4 that just came up here, let me read those to you quickly. I won't mention their names. But if Southwest Airlines had assembled a focus group and asked them, what's the stupidest thing we could do to ruin our company, this is what they would have come up with. Somebody else says, everything I used to love is unusable garbage now. Google, Southwest, TV streaming, online shopping, greed is destroying literally everything. The next person says, where are we here? Southwest becoming Spirit Airlines overnight. This will be a brutal move for them. No more checked bags, no more free seating. Nothing stands in the way of making them better than Spirit at this point. And then what's this? This one here. I mean, is Southwest aware that now people are no longer incentivized to fly with them? That's just honestly, that's a 3-second sample of the first ones that pop up when I just type in Southwest on Twitter.
Right. And look, Southwest's own attempt to mollify people, with their tweet yesterday, or maybe it was on Blue Sky, I don't know. But, they said, at least we didn't trade Luka, referring to the Dallas, I think it's the Dallas basketball team. I'm not a basketball fan. But, that bombed too. And people are like, you took this away. And she said, I'm giving you, we still give you free ginger ale. And they're like, your attempt at humor is failing.
Yeah.
I think, David, you made a very important point, that the comments we're seeing are from people who are not the miles and points aficionados. And I believe that's for a very important reason. The mile and points aficionados aren't flying Southwest. They don't care about Southwest, because guess what? Southwest doesn't have premium cabins, lounges, business class, long haul networks, airline partners, and so on. So for the truly passionate people about loyalty, they're with the alliance-based airlines, or airlines like those that are global or semi-global in nature, and have airline partners and premium cabins, frills, all of that. I agree with the person who said, if they'd assembled a focus group and asked them what's the dumbest thing we could do at Southwest Airlines, that they would say, get rid of free checked bags. Maybe they did ask that question, but they weren't supposed to listen to them. So, it is, I think what is interesting is, having just been in Dallas for 4 days, including Tuesday when this announcement was made, was how extensive and how widely discussed this change is. People feel cheated. They feel like their best friend is a turncoat. They're embarrassed. They're sad. They're angry. And again, even if they are infrequent travelers, the value of those free check bags is so compelling. And I've since heard from people who said, look, I take my school kids on Southwest because the people are friendly. They're good about letting us getting on the plane, but also getting those free check bags helps a lot when you're traveling with young ones. I've heard others saying that the free check bags makes up for a lot of things that they're willing to put up with at Southwest. The lack of extra legroom seating, the lack of assigned seating, the lack of the frills, etc. And they're willing to put up with all of that. Southwest has lost its suit of armor, and they shed that suit of armor amidst the never-ending battle with their fellow competitors who are still out there jousting for them.
It's interesting because Southwest is you open any business school textbook, and there's going to be Southwest makes an appearance in pretty much every edition. It seems to me, as we're coming up on time for our chat today, but it seems to me that if I was to put some new batteries in my crystal ball, it's a pretty safe bet that Southwest isn't going to lose its spot in management textbooks in the years to come, regardless of how this change turns out for them. It's certainly noteworthy enough for discussion.
Now, look, they may be studied in business schools and maybe other graduate programs, but it's going to be about how they destroyed themselves, how they go about destroying the culture. They just laid off 1,750 people. That's the first large-scale layoff they ever had. How do they do it with pre-recorded online videos? This is an airline that prizes culture to the point that it gets an uppercase C, and employees get an initial uppercase E. It is what Herb Kelleher and Colleen Barrett, CEO and president of the airline, for decades held sacred and built the company on. And to your point, that's a big part of why they were business school cases and organizational behavior case studies and more. And now they're going to be a case study of how you destroy a brand and a business with a handful of bad decisions.
Henry, I'm not going to ask you to prognosticate about what you would do had you been in the board's position dealing with.
I would have told him to sorry. I really would have.
No.
I were Bob Jordan, I would have said we are going to be penny wise and pound foolish with this decision, and stop. Again, the people at Elliott know less than nothing about the airline business. It is a very unique, very distinct business for good and bad reasons, but it is different than running restaurants or retail or software companies or almost anything else. There's very little that is, quote, normal, quote, or, quote, usual, unquote, about the airline business. And when you have three key competitors who are global carriers, all alliance members, one of them with equity stakes in multiple airlines around the world, and outstanding credit card programs, to the point that one of your competitors, Delta, claims its co-brand, the spend on its co-brand card with American Express comes close to equaling 1% of US GDP. You need to tell the activist investor, get out of my business and start looking at these other guys and what they're doing that's working for them, and let us take the steps necessary to do that. But understand, this isn't bewitched. I can't wiggle my nose and make something happen in an instant.
I think that, I just as sort of the last topic to quickly cover, I think there is a prima facie ability to understand where the investor is coming from, in the sense of, as investors spend their time in, Excel tables, comparing, company A and company B and company C, and they try to standardize everything they're looking at, and they look at it and they say, well, hey, they charge for check bags, you don't. They have basic economy and you don't. And they're charging for this and you don't. And to the uneducated person who doesn't appreciate the nuances of the airline industry, as you just clearly enunciated, it could be very easy in an amateur way to be saying, oh, well, if you just did this, you'll improve your financials. The reality is we went through a phase, even if you just looked at the legacies as a case study, if you were an investor taking careful note of this, 10 years ago, you would look at the legacies, the big three especially, and say, well, look, they moved in lockstep. Delta did something, the other two carbon copied, because they thought, well, Delta must be smarter. If we just copy them exactly, we'll reap the revenue benefits like they did. They figured out, maybe it took COVID, but it started even just before COVID. They figured out that actually carbon copying doesn't work because they're each different. They have different fortress hubs. They have different customer bases. They have different route networks. And something that I've been pleased to see, even though I don't necessarily agree with every decision they always make, but something that's been very pleasing to see, certainly coming out of COVID, has been that they've all tried to form their own identities and recognize that, you know what, our customer base is not the same as our competitors' customer base. We have to do things our way. And I don't know, but if I was an activist investor taking note of these things, that's the first thing I would have noticed would have been, well, you know what, diverging strategies are actually reaping some results at airline A, or, you know, not so much at airline B. It's a much more nuanced conversation to have. So it does seem a little odd that it's not odd to me that the conversations happen from the investor's perspective. It's odd to me that the airline has executed on them in the manner that it has without some level of strong pushback. But
right.
Easy to be an armchair CEO on this.
Right. Look, I mean, you know, when Elliott announced its investment, Southwest tried to meet with them and was rebuffed. You know, Elliott, you know, before Elliott made such a significant investment in Southwest, for that matter, it could have been any airline, right? They should have said, you know what, we know investing. We don't know the airline business. We know it as travelers, certainly. We can see what we can see, but we don't know what goes on behind the curtain. So they should have brought in objective industry experts who could have said, this is how it works. This is how they make money. This is how they differentiate. Yes, they charge for bags, but these guys do it this way. These guys do it this slightly different way, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and there's this one airline over here that's not doing it. And so on. And had they done so, and had they listened with both ears, as my mother used to tell me as a little boy, you know, they would have heard probably some very important information that would have led them to understand, okay, you know, if we want to make an investment in Southwest, if we believe there are ways to for the airline to improve its revenue, we have to understand that making some of these changes may take a long time, may be difficult, could involve government approvals, like, you know, the new seating plans will for the extra legroom seats. The FAA has to sign off on it. And understanding the technology systems they use and the implications of that and more. And then maybe they would say, okay, you know, yes, we believe they could add hundreds, maybe more, many hundreds of billions of dollars, or millions of dollars, excuse me, maybe, you know, a few billion to their top line and become much more profitable. But it's not going to be a quick hit. And if you're looking for a quick hit as an activist investor, investing in an airline is not for you. Trust me, I lived through the battle between Frank Lorenzo and Texas Air Corporation and Carl Icahn when I was working at TWA. You know, Icahn won that, but he came in and thought, okay, this is going to be easy to fix. And he soon learned, no, it's not. And so Elliott has dug itself into this, painted itself into this corner. And now, you know, they're trying to force decisions that are going to be, you know, that will result, I think, in just the opposite kind of results that they want. They are going to see people defect. They're going to see Southwest have to struggle more to get business. You talked about what are they going to have to do. You know, I wouldn't be surprised to see Southwest be very aggressive with fare promotions to buy back business. I wouldn't be surprised if they said, hey, if you buy this fare during the next 72 hours and use this code, you'll get a credit towards a free check bag. They're going to have to do something. I think that they may have to loosen the requirements to earn A-list and A-list preferred, to artificially grow the number of people eligible, to keep them loyal to Southwest, even if they don't really financially deserve that. And you know, what I'm worried about is none of these decisions are great decisions financially. None of these are necessarily going to help Southwest earn more money. It may just help them keep the business they've got, and then maybe not even all of it. Mm-hmm. You know, look, again, having spent a lot of time in Dallas, having lived in Dallas when I was working on the advertising for American earlier in my career, I've seen far too many Dallas-based airlines go away. Braniff, Legend being two of the largest. But I don't want to see Southwest disappear. And that, we don't know if it will happen, how it will happen, but they're making bad decisions that are weakening their business foundation. And it's terrible. It's terrible for the employees. It's terrible for other investors, but it's really terrible for the customers and the communities the airline serves.
Henry Harteveldt, thank you so much for spending all this time discussing it with us here. I have no doubt we're going to be discussing it again in the future. I think it's very much a case of watch this space. It's an enormous amount of insight that you've shared with us today. So thank you very much for that. We look forward to speaking again soon.
Well, thanks. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you inviting me on, David.
Thanks, Henry.
Take care.